Windy Mindy. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was known as Windy Mindy. Way back when she was a baby, Mindy discovered she had the most awful talent for breaking wind. Bubble bombs, tharps, toilet tunes, putt putts, underbarbs, trouser toots, bluts, bench warmers, little Tommy squeakers, honkers, bottom yodels. Call them what you will, Mindy would delight in letting them rip. The little girl was so good at trumping she could compete in it for her country. Mindy's wind took on many different shapes and sizes. The little girl could do silent ones, loud ones, differing ones, long ones, short ones, ones that went rat-a-tat-tat like a machine gun, and even explosive ones. Mindy's was a talent that appalled everyone unfortunate enough to be near her. But the little girl was full of mischief and absolutely loved the chaos her winds caused. There would be stampedes in supermarkets, charges in churches, and pandemonium in patisseries. People would often be trampled underfoot as they tried to escape the smell. Mindy would deliberately fill herself up with food she knew would make her bottom burp. She would devour all of the following in gigantic quantities. Baked beans, prune juice, dried figs, porridge, brown sauce, sherbet, turnips, mushy peas, sweet corn, curried eggs, fizzy pop. Beetroot, cabbage, lentil soup, radishes, cauliflower cheese, bananas, some which had even turned black, raw onions, Brussels sprouts, and stuffing. At school, the teachers would often send Mindy out of lesson for her outbursts. Mindy would claim it was an accident, but the truth was she did it on purpose every single time. Either the noise would be so disruptive or the smell so overpowering that the classroom had to be evacuated. Then off Mindy would be sent to the headmistress's office, where she would be given a stern ticking off. Mindy, I am extremely disappointed in you, announced the headmistress on a particular morning that our story begins. The lady kept the door of her office open as a precaution, just in case the little girl let out another one. Sorry, headmistress, said Mindy with a smirk. This is the 12th time this week a teacher has sent you to my office. It's only Tuesday. I said sorry. Sorry isn't good enough. Today, Miss Prism had to send you out of her maths lesson for making a noise like thunder. Yesterday, your poor history teacher, Miss Ping, actually fainted in the classroom at the Pong and had to be taken to the sick bay. I think Ping did the Pong, suggested Mindy with another smirk. It's Miss Ping, and for your information, in the 20 years she has worked at this school, I've never known the fragrant Miss Ping to make a Pong. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? An evil thought shot across the girl's mind. Came a sound. There was a short delay as the pongtastic aroma floated across the room. Finally, the dark and dirty smell snaked its way up the headmistress's nostrils. The lady hastily covered her mouth and nose with her handkerchief. You wicked child, she shouted as Windy Mindy stifled a giggle. Get out! Get out of my office at once! She shooed the little girl out of the room as quickly as she could. Shoo! 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 As Mindy took each step towards the door, she blew a little bottom bubble in the direction of the lady. One more sound out of you and you will be expelled. Do you hear me? Expelled, bellowed the mistress, and slammed her office door shut. Mindy stood alone in the corridor once more, feeling rather pleased with herself. She skipped off, tooting all the way. Not wishing to return to her maths lesson, Mindy looked for an empty classroom to hide in until break time. She slipped into the music room. An array of instruments stood ready to be plucked, played, or blown into. Unsurprisingly, Mindy was drawn to the wind instruments. The saxophone, the trumpet, the trombone, the tuba all stood glistening in their stands. The biggest of them was the tuba, and Mindy walked slowly towards it as if in a trance. The little girl had no musical ability she knew of, and when she tried to blow into the instrument, a pathetic rumbling sound came out. But just as she was about to give up, Mandy had a mischievous thought. She held the ends of the tuba behind, blowing wind from her bottom towards the tuba as hard as she could. A long note came out from the tuba. Pleasantly surprised at the sound, Mindy tried again, 3 notes this time in quick succession. Dee-doo-doo-doo-doo. The girl was beginning to get a feel for the instrument now. Soon Mindy started putting the notes together in something resembling a tune. It wasn't a classical masterpiece. Rather, it had the feel of free-form jazz about it. Delighted at the discovery, Mindy began to whirl around the room with the tuba at her behind. The sound the girl was making by now was nothing short of wondrous. Outside the classroom, the elderly music teacher, Mr. Tinkle, was passing by. The music stopped him in his tracks. In all his years of teaching, he had never heard a pupil play so superbly. It brought tears to his eyes. When Mr. Tinkle opened the door to the music room, so did the smell. At first, the music teacher was horrified at what he had saw. One of his beloved instruments being powered by a windy child's bottom. He was about to shout at Mindy to stop, but the sheer beauty of the music made him pause. As the music soared, so did his heart. The young girl was a musical prodigy. She could become one of the all-time greats, playing huge sellout concerts all over the world. As for Mr. Tinkle, he could be remembered as the humble teacher who discovered a musical superstar. "Mindy," he exclaimed, "you are a genius." "It's just my bottom burping, sir," replied the little girl. "I know, but please keep those beautiful bottom burps coming. The sound they make is magnificent." "If you say so, sir." That night, the music teacher rushed over to Windy Mindy's house to talk to her long-suffering parents about his master plan. They were delighted that their daughter's dubious gift could at last be put to good use, and even more delighted that it would be out of their house. Now, they wouldn't have to sit watching television with pegs on their noses. The next morning at school, Mr. Tinkle presented the girl with a very special present, a shiny new tuba. "Now, Mindy," began Mr. Tinkle, "I need you to practice until your bum goes numb." "Yes, sir." "I have booked the greatest music venue in the world to launch your glittering career. The Royal Albert Hall." Went the girl's bottom. "Was that on purpose?" asked the music teacher. "No, sir, just nerves." So enthused was Mr. Tinkle about his protege's talent that he set about inviting the greatest composers and conductors from all over the world to her concert debut. He even invited royalty, the Duke and Duchess of somewhere or other. Meanwhile, Mindy did just as Mr. Tinkle said. Every night after school, she spent hours in the music room practicing on her tuba. There was so much toxic gas in the room that the paint peeled off the walls, much to the delight of the little girl. And as fast as the big night was approaching, finally the day came. Windy Mindy was to make her world debut at the Royal Albert Hall. Tonight, at the Royal Albert Hall, Mr. Tinkle presents a musical prodigy, Mindy on Wind. In Mindy's vast dressing room backstage, there were last-minute preparations. The little girl was delighted to devour as many of her special windy foods as she possibly could. Porridge, beans, eggs, stuffing, lentil soup, dried figs, prune juice, mushy peas, cauliflower cheese, cabbage were all mixed together in a giant vat before she poured it down her throat. To ensure that she would have enough wind for the performance, she topped it up with a huge bottle of fizzy pop. Now Mindy's tummy was bubbling with air. "Isn't it great? I think I'm going to explode, sir," she said. "I'll have enough wind to play for hours." She added before excitedly clambering onto a trampoline. As soon as she started bouncing up and down, she began counting. 300, 299, 298. A tiny Tommy squeaker escaped from Mindy's bottom with every jump. Boing, boing, boing. After bouncing for over an hour, the food and the drink in the girl's tummy had been mixed together nicely. or horribly, depending how you look at it. Meanwhile, all of the distinguished guests had been seated in the auditorium. Even the Duke and Duchess of somewhere or other had come. He in a velvet dinner suit, and she in a ball gown with a diamond tiara atop her head. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight shone on Mr. Tinkle as he shuffled onto the huge stage of the Royal Albert Hall. Your Royal Highness, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very special evening. Tonight I'm going to introduce you to my musical discovery. A girl who just 1 month ago had never played a note of music in her life. There was a gasp from the audience. They could hardly believe their ears. Please, please, called Mr. Tinkle over murmurs that were growing louder by the moment. You will not be disappointed. This young girl is one of the greatest free form of jazz tuba players of her age, no, of all time. The audience broke into wild applause. Mr. Tinkle smiled and bowed his head before continuing. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Windy Mindy. The audience shook their heads in disbelief as the little girl strolled on stage. Surely there was some mistake. The child was far too small to be a great tuba player. Mindy smiled and bowed to the audience. As she did so, a little pop, 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 pop popped out of her bottom. Mr. Tinkle looked on nervously from the side of the stage. Fortunately, as it was downstage, no one seemed to hear, though one of the backstage workers did faint. Next, Mindy turned round and placed the tuba behind her bottom, ready to blow her winds towards it. Gasp! The audience was scandalised. They had never seen anything so rude, and in the Royal Albert Hall. Which is not just a big hall, it's actually royal. For a moment, it seemed like a riot might break out. Mindy looked across to Mr. Tinkle, who gestured frantically for the girl to begin, so she did. Immediately, sweet music filled the hall. The audience was shocked into silence. The sound Windy Mindy made was beautiful beyond words. After just a few notes, she had everyone entranced. They were all in the palm of her bottom. This was a moment in musical history that the world would never forget. Mr. Twinkle was sure of it. However, after all that gassy food and fizzy pop, plus of course all that bouncing up and down on a trampoline, Mindy's wind was particularly fierce. The smell was so appalling, it actually burns the nostrils when it went up the nose. Needless to say, dear reader, this is the point in the story where things begin to go horribly wrong. Suddenly, the music teacher noticed that one by one, the rows of audience members were withering like dead flowers. First the front row with the Duke and Duchess in it. Then the second, then the third. The stink was hitting them like a tidal wave. As Mindy played on, she forced more and more gas out of her bottom. In no time at all, the entire audience had passed out. Mr. Tinkle rushed onto the stage to make Mindy stop, but the wall of smell floored him in an instant, and he fell off the stage and plunged into a piano in the orchestra pit. Clang! Suddenly, Mindy realised, as much as she wanted to, she just couldn't stop blowing off. Up until today, she had always enjoyed being able to deliver her trumps to order, but now her bottom and her bubbly tummy was buzzing way out of control. Her bubbly tummy was expanding at an alarming rate. Nothing could hold the gas back. Her bottom was about to go nuclear. There was an eerie silence for a few seconds before when Mindy shot so much air out of her behind, so unbelievably fast that she actually took off like a rocket. The gas propelled her up, and her tuba up, up, up into the air, and she smashed through the domed roof of the Royal Albert Hall. Mindy zoomed up through the starlit sky at lightning speed, heading straight for outer space. Up there on the International Space Station, the astronauts on board reported hearing some rather impressive free-form jazz, thinking it might be alien life attempting to make contact. They put on their spacesuits and rushed outside, only to find themselves gazing open-mouthed in shock at a little girl hurtling past with a tuba behind her behind and a look of terrible panic on her face. That was the very last sighting of Windy Mindy. So what is the moral of this tale, I hear you ask? It's that there is absolutely nothing funny about breaking wind, which is why I would never write a story about it. Ban the bottom butt. Well, that was cool. My two really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Make sure you keep your eye on the next one. Have a good weekend, guys. See you soon. All the best. Goodbye.